Did you know that one of the most cruel queens in the Bible almost destroyed the lineage of David, but that God intervened in a surprising way to change everything? Today, we will delve into the fascinating story of Athaliah, a queen who tried to erase the divine promise, but ended up facing the consequences of her actions. And the best part, you will discover how this story brings incredible lessons for our lives today. So, stay with me until the end, and if you like content like this, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. Athaliah's trajectory is an impressive and dark example of how individual decisions can profoundly impact the spiritual and political direction of a nation. As the daughter of Jezebel and King Ahab, she inherited a legacy marked by idolatry, violence, and opposition to divine precepts. The story of her parents, Jezebel and Ahab, is one of the most significant in the scriptures, illustrating how the union between a king of Israel and a Phoenician princess resulted in a spiritual and political crisis for the people of God. Ahab, son of Omri, ruled Israel during one of the longest reigns of the northern kingdom, totaling 22 years. Although politically skilled, he is remembered primarily for his moral weakness and for having committed acts that displeased the Lord more than any of his predecessors. A defining moment in his rule was his marriage to Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, ruler of Sidon, an influential Phoenician kingdom. This union, although politically strategic, had serious consequences for Israel. Jezebel, the daughter of a priest of Baal who ascended the Sidonian throne, was a strong-willed, influential, and ruthless woman. When she married Ahab, she brought not only her culture, but also her devotion to Baal, the god of fertility and storms, and to Asherah, considered a mother goddess. Jezebel introduced the worship of these deities into Israel, erecting altars and promoting rituals that were abominable in the eyes of God. She also persecuted the Lord's prophets, trying to eliminate the worship of the God of Israel. Among the most notable episodes of her opposition to the Lord is the persecution of the prophet Elijah, who directly confronted the legitimacy of Baal in events such as the challenge on Mount Carmel. Ahab, in turn, was easily influenced by Jezebel and demonstrated a lack of spiritual leadership. Ahab's connivance with acts such as the murder of Naboth to obtain his vineyard reveals how his reign was permeated by injustice and corruption. Jezebel, far from being just a passive consort, played an active role in running the kingdom, assuming functions that would traditionally fall to the king. The legacy of idolatry and moral decadence left by Jezebel and Ahab impacted future generations. It was in this environment of power, idolatry, and corruption that Athaliah, the couple's daughter, was born. Although the scriptures do not offer many details about her childhood, it can be assumed that she was raised in a context deeply influenced by the worship of Baal and Asherah, in addition to the imposing leadership of her mother, who disregarded divine commandments. Jezebel, known for her determination to impose her will, probably shaped Athaliah's character, transmitting to her her audacity and contempt for God's laws. Athaliah's connection to Judah occurred through a marriage of a strategic nature. As the wife of Jehoram, son of the pious king Jehoshaphat, Athaliah played a crucial role in the union of the royal houses of Israel and Judah. Jehoram, raised in an environment of prosperity and stability, was the heir to a kingdom that had experienced great fidelity to God during the reign of his father, Jehoshaphat. Known for his devotion, Jehoshaphat had strengthened Judah spiritually, eliminating pagan altars, promoting the study of the law, and seeking peaceful alliances. However, Jehoram's life story shows how outside influences and personal choices can corrupt even the most godly of legacies. His marriage to Athaliah, daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, symbolized a political alliance between Judah and Israel, nations that were often at odds. Jehoshaphat, seeking stability and unity between the kingdoms, consented to this union, but the decision ended up having disastrous consequences. Athaliah brought with her the idolatrous and corrupt customs of the house of Ahab, contaminating the spiritual heart of the kingdom of Judah. Although the alliance was seen as advantageous from a human perspective, spiritually, it paved the way for idolatry and disobedience. The legacy of decadence from the house of Ahab began to take root in Judah, which had previously enjoyed periods of obedience and blessing under faithful leaders. Influenced by Athaliah's dominating presence, Jehoram turned away from God's precepts. Despite being the son of a king who trusted the Lord completely, Jehoram chose to follow the ways of his wife and the house of Ahab. The consequences of this decision were devastating. His reign was marked by idolatry, injustice, and moral decline, as recorded in the scriptures. Athaliah's impact on Judah was not limited to her presence as queen consort. She perpetuated the legacy of Jezebel, promoting idolatry and resistance to the Lord. The introduction of the Baal and Asherah cults into Judah, practices deeply rooted in the Canaanite and Phoenician pantheon, marked a radical departure from Judah's spiritual traditions. These cults involved practices such as animal sacrifices, fertility rituals, and, in extreme cases, even human sacrifice. Such rites were contrary to divine principles, subverting the holiness and fidelity required by the God of Israel. The impact was catastrophic spiritually and socially. Idolatry not only violated divine commandments, but also distorted the moral foundations of the nation. Jehoram met a tragic end, dying a painful and dishonorable death, as recorded in the Chronicles. His reign ended in suffering, and he was not mourned by the people, in contrast to his father, who received royal honors. After his death, Athaliah, now a widow, took extreme measures to consolidate her power. Determined to eliminate any threat to her rule, she ordered the massacre of the entire royal line, including her own grandchildren. This brutal act was one of the cruelest recorded in the history of Judah. But even in the midst of such darkness, divine providence set the stage to reverse this cycle of destruction. The story of Athaliah highlights the consequences of sin and idolatry, but also God's faithfulness in preserving his plan and promises for his chosen people. Even in the face of Athaliah's cruel actions, divine intervention stood as a reminder of the sovereignty and justice of the Lord. The story of Athaliah was a reminder of the Lord's sovereignty and justice. The story of Athaliah was a reminder of the Lord's sovereignty and justice. The story of Athaliah was a reminder of the Lord's sovereignty and justice. The Lord said, "Take her out of the sanctuary and kill her with the sword, but not in the temple of the Lord." Thus, Athaliah was captured and executed at the appointed place, ending her reign of idolatry and oppression. This act of justice was accompanied by the renewal of the covenant between God, the people of Judah, and the young King Joash. Spiritual and political restoration. With the fall of Athaliah, Jehoiada took decisive action to restore true worship of the Lord and re-establish divine order in the kingdom. He led the people in a solemn covenant in which they pledged to follow the Lord as their only God. The altars and temples dedicated to Baal were destroyed, the idols were broken, and Muttan, the priest of Baal, was executed before the altars he had used for abominable practices. The temple of the Lord was reopened as the center of Judah's spiritual life. Under Jehoiada's leadership, the people celebrated the return to pure and true worship, reaffirming their allegiance to the God of Israel. Joash, anointed and now ruling as king, became the symbol of the restoration of the Davidic line and the renewal of the divine covenant. A hopeful ending, the rise of Joash to the throne and the fall of Athaliah marked a new beginning for Judah. This event emphasizes God's sovereignty over history, demonstrating that even in the midst of corruption, idolatry, and oppression, he remains faithful to his promises. The line of David, threatened with extinction, was preserved, ensuring the fulfillment of God's plans, including the future emergence of the Messiah. The biblical account of Athaliah's life and her fall is a powerful reminder that unwise alliances and the selfish pursuit of power bring destruction, but also that God is able to redeem even the darkest situations, restoring justice, true worship, and hope to his people. This narrative, rich in symbolism and spiritual lessons, highlights several key points about God's faithfulness and the responsibility of leaders and individuals. 1. The divine plan always prevails. Even in the face of extreme acts of tyranny and idolatry, such as those of Athaliah, God protected and preserve his promise to David. Josh's survival demonstrates that God's plans cannot be thwarted, regardless of human opposition. 2. The separation of the sacred from the profane. Athaliah's removal from the temple before her execution symbolizes a deep respect for the sanctity of the place and a desire to restore the spiritual purity of Judah. This act of separation reinforces the importance of preserving the integrity of what is sacred to God. 3. Faithful leadership and courage. Jehoiada and Jehoshaphat stood out as examples of obedience and faith in the midst of corruption. Their boldness in protecting Joash and planning his coronation showed how faith in action can transform a nation, guiding it back to the divine path. 4. Idolatry leads to ruin. Athaliah is an example of how turning away from God and seeking power at any cost brings personal and collective destruction. Her actions resulted not only in her own downfall, but also in the disintegration of everything she had built. 5. Spiritual restoration. The renewed covenant between God, the people, and the king, led by Jehoiada, marks a pivotal moment in the history of Judah. This renewal was not just political, but deeply spiritual, reorienting the nation toward the values of obedience and devotion. 6. The role of the faithful in God's story. Through Jehoiada, Jehoshaphat, and other believers, we see how God works through people to accomplish his purposes. Even in times of darkness, there are those who rise up in faithfulness to act according to God's will. 7. Lesson for future generations. The story of Athaliah and Joash serves as a continual reminder to leaders and nations. Governing with justice, godly fear, and faithfulness is essential to spiritual and social well-being. Power and authority come from God and should be used to promote his glory, not one's own interests. Conclusion. This account demonstrates that even when all seems lost, God is in control, bringing redemption and renewal. He remains faithful to his promises and raises up agents of change to restore his order and purpose. These lessons continue to resonate today, challenging us to trust God, resist evil, and act as instruments of justice and renewal in a world that still faces corruption and spiritual alienation. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel, like it, and click on one of the 2 videos that will appear to continue watching. Hugs, and may God be with you.